And welcome back to another edition of the On the Board Sports Podcast. I am your host, Will Cherucci, a.k.a. Will C., coming to you from Long Island, New York. Still in quarantine right now. It's a beautiful day outside, but hey, we got to make the best of a bad situation, and I'm always joined by my wonderful co-host, Sean Thomas, a.k.a. Shawnee on the mic. Sean, how are you, bud?
Well, I'm doing good. I'm doing good on this beautiful Tuesday. How are you doing, sir?
Hanging in, can't complain. Tuesday, we're making the best of a bad situation, but we are joined by a very, very special guest. Joining us from ESPN is the one and only Doug Kezirian. Doug, thank you for coming on. How are you?
It's good to be with you guys. Thanks for having me. I think it's all about perspective and reference point, right? What's your baseline? I'm healthy, kind of chilling at home, don't have a family to worry about. ESPN still going strong right now, so no complaints whatsoever. But obviously, I'm inconvenienced like everyone else, and we're all hoping for the best and a speedy return to normal, I should say. And just, it is what it is kind of thing.
Awesome to hear. Doug, how did you get started up in broadcasting, number one? And number two, you went to Brown University. You worked your way up. You worked in Las Vegas for a little bit. Tell us about your journey and how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah, no, thanks. So basically, I kind of always wanted to do some form of journalism. And when you're younger, you just kind of like do whatever is in front of you. So when I was in high school, I wrote for my student newspaper, the whole reporter thing, and then kind of kept graduating. And I was a sports editor my senior year and also had a column. And then also so I grew up in LA. So I also wrote for the LA Daily News. Now, the position's called stringers. It's kind of a popular term. It's basically like you're like the lowest rung. You're not really a reporter, but you go out and so I did stuff for the high school beat, if you will. So I'd have to travel to football games, volleyball games, basketball games, take stats, and then call in a score on a payphone. Yeah, that's how old I am. So call in the score or call in an article, like write like 3 paragraphs because it was a night game and it had to go to print at night. None of this laptop, courtside, internet stuff. So I just was like covering, I got my byline in the newspaper a couple times, even wrote a couple features. So I was really, kind of like wet my beak, so to speak. And so just seeing that it could be a career instead of just an extracurricular activity at high school. So when I went to Brown, there's no formal communications major. I was an econ majors, but I was able to kind of continue that with the Brown Daily Herald, which is the student newspaper, but then also did some voice stuff. So like I did some on-campus radio. And that's when I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then after that, I got some TV internships every summer. Again, I couldn't do stuff like some of these journalism schools where we had a campus radio. Like there was no TV network at Brown at that point. So just did summer internships and worked in New York and was just like, this is the coolest thing ever. So I decided I wanted to do it as a real career. And then I sort of sent out tapes, went to Missouri, then Iowa for a total of like 4.5 years. And carried the camera, did all that kind of, it's the equivalent of like kind of minor league baseball, right? Like you go to Class A to Double A to Triple A and then the big league. So, and a lot of people have different paths, and I can just speak to my path, and it's a relatively common path for anchors in the business. Now, some kind of just stay put, don't kind of keep climbing. It's never that fun to just continue to relocate and pack up the U-Haul. So I went to those markets and then went to Vegas, as you had mentioned, and I was in Vegas 7 years. Didn't want to relocate for just the sake of relocating. And then obviously when ESPN called, I went to ESPN, and I've been here for about 8 years. And I've worn a few different hats here at ESPN, but now focused on the sports betting beat permanently.
Doug, man, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. Doug, I do have a 2-part a question. The first part is, how was it going from the West Coast, growing up there, coming all the way east to go to school, number one? And number two, can you tell us more about the show, the daily wager show that you do?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. A lot of people have asked me that, and it's a shock to the system. Now, fortunately, I have four older brothers, and they all kind of went east to school, so I kind of knew about whether visiting them or just whatever. I wasn't completely a fish out of water, but for sure, it was a shock to the system for anyone growing up in that kind of perfect weather. But you know what? It's kind of, you just deal with it. I mean, I don't know. It gets old complaining about the weather every day. It's one thing when it's like May and we had a snowstorm last weekend. Like that's, I think, justifiable. or I shouldn't say a storm, but a little bit of a flurry. But like mid-January and it snows, like probably it's a broken record if you're complaining about the weather. So you kind of know about stuff. You kind of just deal with it. But that's sort of me being super analytical and trying to kind of manage and suppress emotions. But it was one of the things you just had to deal with. But you're right, especially in Rhode Island, there's just not a ton of sunlight. So there are sometimes things where you're just like, what the heck? You know, you're just like, enough is enough. Like one year I came back from spring break and there was snow on the ground. You're like, man, come on. But, no, the Daily Wager's been a lot of fun. We just had our year anniversary right around when the pandemic started.
Awesome.
And, you know, not many people knew what to expect. And I understand that. Now, I had done similar show when I was in Vegas. Like I did a drive time radio show on ESPN Radio out there. And obviously it was a radio versus TV, but, you know, previewing that night's games, talking about it, maybe the little futures market. But just the fact that it was ESPN, and obviously when you do things at ESPN, they're this kind of groundbreaking now. It wasn't the only show in the marketplace, but it was groundbreaking definitely for ESPN and just the bullseye and the spotlight. So we kind of had a lot of eyeballs, and we wanted to do it right, especially something that could be done wrong. A very sensitive topic. I knew we had the legalization with the Supreme Court ruling, but you just don't know what everyone's sort of stigma and view on gambling is, especially because ESPN has so many relationships and contracts with sports leagues. So you had to do it tastefully, you had to do it maturely, you had to do it respectfully. But I knew we were going to be fine because we have a great production staff, great producers, great team just across the board, great managers. And we all kind of had the same vision. We wanted to do sort of a sports center vibe with betting. And just that tone, that approach, that there'd be like a journalistic integrity to it. It wouldn't be just kind of craziness, yelling, no, they're going to win, you know, just like kind of uneducated. It was a very smart approach. And I think once we did that and there was any nerves or any apprehension out there, was just like, chill. It's like, all right, you can do this. It's Sports Center with betting. And you know, in a year we've changed a lot. And then the next year we're going to change a lot too. And we're working out all the kinks, but that's sort of the fun part. You're almost at a startup, right? You're at a startup show, right? And it's a lot of fun to take chances, roll the dice a little bit. The producer's been very inclusive with me in terms of being involved in meetings, whether it be conference calls or whatever. They value my input, and sometimes I volunteer it without being asked. But no, it's been very collaborative, which I think is a really cool part of it.
Doug, you worked in Las Vegas for the 7 years that you did before you made the move over to Bristol for ESPN. Talk to us about what professional sports in Las Vegas means right now, because we got to see the growth of the Vegas Golden Knights the past 2 to 3 years, and now the Raiders are now in Las Vegas. So tell us, is there going to be a growth with the Raiders here?
Yeah, no, it's funny. My buddy forwarded me a message, a link the other day. So when I first moved to ESPN in 2012, 2013, I got Vegas Magazine did like a little few Q&A kind of little feature. And one of the things was the NFL. And I was like, oh, obviously the NFL is never going to Vegas, because that was the tone towards Vegas at the time. Of course, obviously I'm eating my words on that. I just didn't think the NFL would go there. Now, obviously society changed with legalization, Supreme Court ruling. But Vegas is a unique town. It's going to take a unique kind of team. And I think the Golden Knights were that team, because so Vegas, and I don't know the percentages, but it's a transient city. There's a lot of people who didn't necessarily grow up there. So you're looking at about 2 million people in terms of population. And I don't know, 30, 40, 50%, something like that grew up there. So they were kind of unclaimed NHL fans. And the other 50% had their team, whether they're from New York or wherever they moved from. But the Golden Knights being the first team, major professional team to go there, they're like, I have friends who live there who are Rangers fans that love the Golden Knights. So there was a welcoming open-mindedness to fans that already had their allegiance. You know, they weren't turning down the Rangers, but they wanted to be on board, and they were passionate about pro sports, because a lot of people live in Vegas who moved from a major city. So just that being that first team. And then I think it's hard to tell the Golden Knights story without mentioning the Mandalay Bay October 1 shootings, because it was right around then. It was opening night, moment of silence, and it really galvanized the city. It's not the only thing that galvanized the city, but it helped galvanize the city. And I think there's just an attachment to the local fans in Vegas with that team. And on top of it, that team was sort of a bunch of cast-offs, right? It was after the expansion. Teams protected their players in the expansion draft. And Vegas they're like, they're relocated, right? So there's a lot of it's us against the world sort of mentality. Now, the Raiders coming in is different because it's not the first pro team. And I think everyone already has their NFL allegiance. I think because there's only going to be 8 home games, it will still be an event. The brand new stadium where it's located right next to the freeway, I think it'll be awesome. I think it's going to be packed. But I don't know if the whole city's going to be rallying around the Raiders. Maybe I'm wrong, but there's Broncos fans that live there within the division. And then there's other teams outside the division, like Niners fans that live there. So I'm curious to see what happens. But with a city of 2 million people, you're going to pack it you're going to have fans that do travel, right? So when I was there, Wisconsin played UNLV. And if you're a Wisconsin fan and you have to travel to X amount of road games, why go to Ann Arbor, Michigan when you go every year? Why go to, right? So they go to Vegas and it was packed. And it was cheaper for Wisconsin fans to buy all the season tickets for the entire season instead of individual tickets. So you're going to see a lot of our fans traveling on the road. You see that with Cubs at the Brewers games and things along those lines. So I wonder how it's going to be, but the city's going to welcome it. I don't think you'll have the Vegas flu component like you did with the Golden Knights the first year because there's only 8 games. There's not 81 in terms of games in Vegas and the road trip thing. I think it'll be business trips for the visiting team. That's my hunch. Maybe they'll be partying Sunday night if they do well and the coach lets them stay, but it's just a different animal. I think the Golden Knights are on an island on their own. It's going to be a different angle, but I do think the city is certainly capable and ready for it.
That's a good point, Doug. That's a good point. Doug, as we know, May is such a great sports month because you have the playoffs in hockey and NBA, and the draft was the previous month, and soccer and baseball, blah, blah, blah. And we don't have any of those things going on. Is it hard going into work or everyone that you work with, knowing that what was the norm you don't have, and trying to grab things and trying to find things to actually speak about?
It's a fair point, but my workload has diminished. So meeting that day-to-day stuff is not the end of the world. So we have daily wagers. We're not having a regular studio show daily. So I'm doing about 2 digital shows a week. I'm writing content. And while SportsCenter can create more content because you cover the absence of sports, you can't really do that with betting. So we're doing a lot of off-season stuff like NFL futures. Caesar Sportsbook released the MVP odds this week, so we're going to do a show tomorrow night on that. And then I wrote some stories like what are people betting on, and did some simulation stuff, some iRacing, some ping pong in Russia and other countries. So there's always stuff to be done. It's just not as much. But in terms of the emotional thing, it's what can you do? So I can sit here and dwell on there's no NBA playoffs, there's no Major League Baseball. We never got March Madness, or you just kind of understand that this is a new situation. Hopefully it's an isolated situation, and just make the most of what you can do, whether it be busy work. I was going through old pictures, scanning them to my laptop and trying to just kind of make good use of this time, which we may never get again, right? Actually the first couple of weeks of the pandemic, I kind of appreciated the ability to unplug. Even the quote unquote dead of summer, there's still baseball going on. There's some tennis tournaments. There's golf. There's maybe even the Olympics like this summer. So there was always something going on, even in the slowest time of year. And you're always kind of scouting the futures market as well. But unplugging for those 2 weeks, especially when you're going a million miles an hour, was really healthy, honestly, for me. So I appreciated that. Now I wanted it to end after a couple of weeks, not wherever we are, 2 months and going. But I try not to dwell on it. I know it's cliched, but it's beyond my control. There's nothing I can do to bring sports back or anything like that. All I can do is sort of, make the most of the situation. Like I said, generate content for ESPN.com on the absence of sports, or NFL content on maybe a season or college football. We're trying to do that, but yeah, it's brutal. It stinks. But again, people have it so much worse. I'm not going to complain when there's people on the front line in the hospitals taking care of business.
Absolutely. Well said, Doug. To get back to your college days at Brown, though, I was reading that you played water polo. What was that like for you?
Well, it's hard to explain because it was kind of a way of life. It was like in high school, and I played in high school, and it was very rigorous sort of training and a very elite level program. So a lot of my teammates in high school went on to play out west in college, and some played in the Olympics and just the junior Olympic stuff, and all Americans in high school and college. So my program really was a program, and trained year round. In the summers, we're up every day, 6 a.m. in the summers in high school, swimming 4 hours a day. It was just, very miserable at times. And it's kind of like The Firm. If you read the book or the movie, it's once you're in, you can't get out. It's that kind of thing, because you've invested, whether it be a couple years, and you're like, well, my time's going to come when I'm a senior. I've already put in the 2 hardest years, kind of learning the sport and learning the pain of swimming and all that. So it was kind of like The Firm we used to laugh about. But I loved the games. I hated the training, but I loved the games. And then I was able to go play at Brown, and it was a great experience. I think playing a college sport at any sort of level, whether it be Alabama football, which obviously is a different situation, but even like a sport like water polo at Brown, I mean, it was just cool. And it was something that makes your college experience more memorable and just different, especially something that has a season and not really much of an off season. We were pretty tame in the off season. I was able to still kind of enjoy college life, but it was awesome. I mean, I miss it. I miss being in shape like that, but it was great. We were top 20. My freshman, sophomore year, we were a lot better. The way it works is if you win Easterns, which is sort of like the New England, I mean, it's like Queens, St. Francis, UMass, us, Princeton, Harvard, Navy. So like the whole region, if you win that, you get a Final Four bid. And that was always our dream. And we came close a couple times, lost in semis, things like that. And then you go to the Final Four and you kind of get smoked by like UCLA or Stanford, USC. But that was always our goal. We didn't get there, but it was a great experience, and obviously really good friends on the team. And every sport's different, right? Football is sometimes over 100 guys, right? Redshirts. But we were only like 15, 20 guys every year. So you have definitely a different sort of vibe within the locker room.
Awesome. Doug, we can't let you go without getting your take on The Last Dance. We've seen parts 1 through 8, Sunday parts 9 through 10. Doug, what are your thoughts on what we've seen so far, and what are you most looking forward to the last 2 parts?
It's been fascinating because I'm an NBA junkie. You guys mentioned growing up in LA, grew up during the Showtime era. So when they're talking about the 91 Bulls, I'm like, yep, Sam Perkins 3 to win game 1, then what happened, right? Like I kind of knew so much. Even the stuff off the court, like the Pippen contract stuff, people were kind of amazed. And I knew that back then just because, again, I'm such a diehard with all of sports, but particularly the NBA. So, but there was obviously a ton that I didn't know. I didn't know the backstory, all the backstory about the Dream Team. I knew the Jordan rift with Isaiah, but some of the other stuff. So it's been educational, just like any documentary, right? It's been educational.
Right.
It's been a little bit of a memory lane for me because it's when you're first developing that love of sports, you remember all this stuff, right? It's not just your favorite team, favorite thing. Like I don't just remember Kirk Gibson's home run in the '88 World Series. I remember watching my teams already be eliminated. I remember watching the Worm and Aunt Rodman on the Bulls. And you start remembering stuff. You're like, God. Now, I had watched the '93 finals, that game 6. The Suns had them, and then down up 4 with like a minute to go. And then I've actually watched that on YouTube because I wanted to learn more about it. And so, but it's fascinating to see how close some of those teams were with Jordan. We're going to learn that with the Jazz this weekend. So I've actually been excited, kind of looking at it through a different lens, being my age now versus as a kid, kind of idolizing Jordan. I had the posters, the Wings poster. I had a couple of his shoes growing up, but seeing it through the lens where I have, all these years of hoops knowledge and seeing what the modern day is, so kind of seeing Jordan then through this lens. I've enjoyed that. And I'm actually just appreciative of the younger generation. I do a podcast, and one of my producers, she's like born in like 96. So it's like, I'm like, yeah, no, it was different. It was different back then. So I've appreciated them learning about Jordan. And not that they're just completely ignorant about it. Obviously, they know about it. But seeing all this and the behind the scenes, the competitiveness and everything, I'm just glad as a basketball fan and other generations getting to experience this 10-hour documentary.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is almost once in a lifetime stuff, just seeing this stuff again for sure.
Oh,
Doug, real quick, okay? Mm-hmm. With all sports leagues being shut down right now and suspended, you do an odds show. What are the odds of sports coming back in June or July? And what will be the first sport back, in your opinion?
Well, I think we're going to be okay with NASCAR and golf, right? So in terms of the team sports, I am not that optimistic. I know they're figuring out right now with baseball around July. I think, it's interesting. I think the human, I don't know what I want to say, like the right word, but it's really been fascinating to observe sort of the human reaction to everything. So we always talk about, particularly in sports, but really in life, we always assume that the path not traveled is successful. So when we talk about Marshawn Lynch and the Malcolm Butler interception, it's like, I should have handed the ball to Marshawn Lynch.
Right.
We assume he would have scored. Who knows? He could have fumbled, right? Everyone just assumes, like, you lose by 20 playing man defense. It's like, yeah, I should have done zone. Maybe I would have lost by 50. You know, so you just don't know. We have no placebo effect on all this stuff. So a lot of times with this is we're assuming the best outcome. And obviously you always want to be optimistic, but there's a path. There's many paths. It's not binary, right? It's not like, oh, we come back and everything goes smoothly as we planned. So there's a lot of ways where this could go wrong and we could regress for, you know, in wasting the last 2 months we've done flattening the curve. Now, am I capable of, you know, running all these sort of models? And of course not. I'm just seeing it as like, well, there's a lot of unknown and I'm definitely not in the know. So I am hopeful. Obviously I'm eager.
Right.
I personally just aren't that optimistic. Now I hope to be proven wrong, but this whole quarantine, bubble, Olympic Village, all this stuff's pretty elaborate. And I think we need to just temper our expectations, because whether it be daily testing, twice a day, whatever it's going to take, you're going to have bumps in the road. I mean, it's just eventually. So what do you do if, like, you're in the NBA finals and LeBron tests positive? Because remember, Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert felt fine. Like, Gobert was going to play that night against the Thunder in OKC if the test came back negative. Right. So now, Grant, because remember, these guys are 20s and 30s, they're in the best shape of their lives. They're some of the best guys, best shape in the world. And so what do you do? Is it something you're just going to have to, like, if someone had the flu-like symptoms, they just play through. You know, Jordan's flu game, right? So now, but you're also, you know, you can infect others. So we're just not there in terms of, like, our medical experts just don't know what's going to happen long-term. And if we're just all going to have to kind of herd immunity. So I just don't think we're there yet. Now, we could be in July, and if that's what we're targeting, awesome. I just think there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of hurdles to clear. So I'm going to say football, NFL, September.
Okay.
That's the first time I think we get a team sports, but I think all the other stuff's doable.
Okay. Fair.
Right. Doug, how can the people follow you on social media, and how can the people listen to your podcast?
Thank you. So whether it be Twitter or Instagram, it's @DougESPN. And so the podcast right now is about once a week. It's called Behind the Bets with Doug Kezirian, my name. And, you know, it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, ESPN.com as well in the podcast section. It's on the list on the right-hand column once you get there. But, you know, we talk gambling, a lot of more actionable information. You know, we talk some stuff in the off season, whether it be legalization of states and stuff, but some of that gets kind of boring. So we want to just handicap games or handicap futures, or, you know, recently we did the NFL draft props. So there's a lot of things on the betting menu these days. And I just want to, you know, if people are novices, we take in questions, things along those lines. So just, you know, it's like any podcast. Go check it out on ESPN.com or Apple, the iTunes, and download.
Awesome, Doug. Thank you so much for joining us and sacrificing some time during this rough period. And, you know, listen, we all want sports back, but at some point in time, you know, we got to, as just a nation, just in general, whether or not you see it on social media, whether or not you see it on the news, we're going to see a new normal. And we don't know whether or not what that new normal is. But when it comes to sports, everybody misses sports. But in general, everybody just has to be patient and trust, you know, trust these numbers and scientists and everything like that are coming out. But we want to thank you for coming on and sacrificing some time to talk with us.
Thank you so much, man.
You got it. My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, guys. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug.
You got it. Be well, guys.
All right,
You too.
All right.
Be safe.
You
that
too.
was the one and only Doug Kezirian of ESPN. Well, awesome guy. Been trying to get him on for the past couple weeks. Finally made some time for us. I know me and you are appreciative.
Yes, we are very appreciative of Doug for coming on. Again, great time, great talk. You know, just going out there and just talking, whether it be about his time at Brown, playing water polo, or even working in Las Vegas, or even, you know, talking about the 30 for 30 documentary on Michael Jordan in The Last Dance. It's been absolutely unbelievable to say the very least, and just want to give Doug his due again. Thank you for coming on. And, hey, hard work always pays off, like he said. So, everybody's got to start somewhere, and we're right there. So just, Doug, thank you again for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Exactly. Well, the interesting part that he said, it's not every day you have someone go from California to Brown University.
Right.
That is crazy to
Yeah.
literally go all the way to the East Coast. But like he said, it was something new and it was a college sport. So definitely a shout out to Doug. And that show that he does, Behind the Bets and the Daily Wager Show. Well, I watch that show a lot because, yeah, it's a betting show, but there's a lot of fantasy football aspects to it as well.
A lot of numbers.
That I tune into that show Sunday around 11:30 before I set a lineup for the Sunday game. So shout out to Doug, man.
Awesome. Hey, great show regardless. So, once again, shout out to Doug Kezirian of ESPN for coming on to the show. Sean, any final thoughts on this episode?
No, Will, just once again, shout out to Doug for making some time. And Will, shout out to you as well. Will, prior to this episode, interviewed the one and only Darius Kasparaitis, former Den Islander. And Will, I know you did a great job. So looking forward to listening to that, pal.
Absolutely. Darius is a great guy, and he's been through a lot, but hey, we all go through a lot. We all have our trials and tribulations. So just shout out to Darius Kasparaitis for coming on and talking some hockey with yours truly. And also shout out again to Doug Kezirian, and shout out to Sean for making the Doug Kezirian thing happen. So just got to give Sean his due on that one. All right, guys. On that note, for everybody here on the Board Sports, for my wonderful co-host Sean Thomas, and for the aforementioned Doug Kezirian of ESPN, I am your host, William Chiarucci, logging out. We will talk to you guys soon. Peace out.